It was almost dawn when Daniel woke up to a sound he couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't the wind rattling against the window, nor the natural creak of the old wooden floor. It was something else, more precise, a rhythm, a cadence, that seemed to repeat as if someone were lightly tapping on some surface. He tried to convince himself it was just the wood contracting with the change in temperature, but an unsettling feeling filled his chest. He looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 3 o'clock sharp. There was something strange about that hour. He had always heard stories that 3 in the morning was the dead hour, the moment when the veil between the world of the living and the dead grew thinner. He had never believed it, but now, alone in his silent house, he couldn't ignore the coincidence. The sound returned. 3 light knocks. A pause. 3 more. They weren't coming from the window nor from the bedroom door. They seemed to come from the hallway. He got up slowly, feeling the chill of the floor under his bare feet. The hallway was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains in the living room. With every step, Daniel's heart pounded harder, as if anticipating something his mind couldn't foresee. The silence was heavy, almost solid, and the knocking had stopped. When he reached the middle of the hallway, he realized he was not alone. Someone was standing at the far end, near the front door, a motionless silhouette, tall and thin, with undefined outlines. Daniel blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the shadow didn't disappear. On the contrary, it seemed to grow sharper. He took a step back, his eyes fixed on the figure. His throat felt dry, his breathing uneven. His mind screamed for him to run back into the bedroom and lock the door, but something inside him, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a twisted instinct, made him stay. The figure moved. It didn't walk, it didn't glide. It simply changed places, as if the space between them had contracted. Now it was closer, still wrapped in shadows, but with details Daniel was beginning to notice. The outline of a head tilted to the side, as if silently watching him. "Who's there?" Daniel's voice came out shaky, almost a whisper. The response was a muffled sound, like a dragged-out sigh, coming from all directions at once. He stepped back again, pressing against the wall. He glanced at the living room clock. Still 3 o'clock. The seconds seemed frozen. Suddenly the house lights flickered, once, twice, 3 times, and when they stabilized, the figure was gone. Daniel stood still for long minutes, trying to catch his breath. Maybe it had been a waking dream, the result of the insomnia that had plagued him for weeks. He tried to believe that, but when he returned to the bedroom, he saw something that froze his blood. On the door, on the inside, there were 3 claw marks, deeply scratched into the wood, still fresh. He didn't have long nails, and no one else lived there. The next night he tried to stay awake on purpose. He made coffee, left all the lights in the house on, and waited. The clock read 2:30, then 2:45. At 2:59, his heart began to race on its own, as if anticipating the inevitable. When the display jumped to 3 o'clock, every light in the house went out at once. A suffocating silence filled the air, and then they began again. 3 slow, measured knocks coming from the front door. Daniel didn't approach this time. He stood frozen in the middle of the living room, eyes wide, trying to convince himself not to look. But curiosity won, and he fixed his gaze on the door. The knocking stopped, and then a low, drawn-out voice whispered his name. "Daniel." The sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside the house. The figure took another step forward, and Daniel felt the floor beneath his feet give way. The emptiness in that thing's face seemed to swallow all the light around it. With every second, its presence grew denser, more suffocating. He tried to run to the front door, but when he opened it, there was no street outside, only darkness, as if his house had been torn from the world and placed in a void, without beginning or end. Behind him, the dragging voice repeated, 3 times, 3 nights, 3 calls. Suddenly it all made sense. The 3 knocks, the 3 marks on the wood, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a ritual, and without realizing it, Daniel had already taken part in it. The living room clock chimed one last time, striking 3 o'clock and 3 minutes. The entire house shook. The figure hurled itself at him, crossing the space in absolute silence. Daniel felt unbearable pressure on his chest, as if invisible hands were crushing him. He struggled to breathe, clawing at the air, but there was nothing to hold on to. His vision blurred, and in the darkness, only that shadow remained, leaning over him, whispering inside his mind, "Now you are the door." Everything went dark. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was sitting in the living room in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and for a moment he thought he had dreamed. But then he noticed the details. The front door was covered in deep scratches, as if dozens of hands had clawed it from the outside in. In the wall mirror, he saw something worse. His reflection didn't move like him. The reflection tilted its head, smiling with a hollow face, like the creature's. That night at exactly 3 o'clock, someone knocked on the neighbor's door.